Internet, my name is Lave and I watched Avengers Endgame for the second time, and apparently the whole world and his wife has been to see it as well because it's absolutely smashing the box office at the moment. Hopefully you've seen it too, because I am going to be delving into spoilers in this one, so that's your warning. And with that in mind, I can now reveal the notes on my enjoyment tracker and talk about things that I loved in more detail and explain the gripes that I had in my spoiler-free review. I'm not going to do a scene-by-scene breakdown like I did for my Infinity War spoiler review because that took me ages to put together and I'm already running late with this video. Normally, if too much time has passed between the film's release, I will just draw a line under doing a review for a film because the internet is awash with so many spoiler talk videos and theories about the film. I just really wanted to talk about this one because it's just, So let's start at the beginning of the film, which picks up with Hawkeye still under house arrest but living quite a happy life with his family, training his daughter while his wife and two boys are preparing a picnic, who then turn to dust as we are expecting, and Clint is like, what the hell is going on? And he's like, that's it, I'm going to go and get a mohawk and become a badass. On a side note, when we see Hawkeye later on in the film in Japan and he's taking out the Yakuza and he has the fight with their gang leader, I was like, oh my god, that's Hiroyuki Sanada, who also popped up in The Wolverine. And I was going a bit schizo because I thought, is he playing the same character as he was in The Wolverine? I don't think he is, but on my first viewing, I was like, oh my god, is this the Fox and X-Men merger? It isn't, but at the time I was like, that'll be pretty cool. But back to Hawkeye and Jeremy Renner, who is great in this, who in that scene is approached by Romanoff, who recruits him back to the team for their second chance mission. And I loved their friendship arc, which comes to an end in this film with Black Widow sacrificing herself to get the Soul Stone so he can be with his family. And that was one of the surprises in the film, Black Widow dying and apparently permanently dying. I certainly didn't see that one coming and I thought that was terrific. It had me guessing right until the end, and of course she dies in exactly the same way that Gamora dies. Yeah, big surprise. But before I get ahead of myself, let's go back to the beginning of the film, which picks up with Tony Stark adrift in space with Nebula. Now again, I really loved the attention to the little character details, giving moments to the lower tier characters like Nebula, who when we first see her in this film is playing flick football with Paper and Tony. And historically throughout the MCU films, Nebula never wins anything, and she wins a game against Tony and it's like, oh, you won, and you see on her face she's like, oh, so surprised, and it creates this connection, and she has real affection towards Tony, and it's really touching how she looks after him in his dying moments, right up until Captain Marvel shows up. And that was one of my other disappointments in the film. I was hoping that they weren't gonna make Captain Marvel a Deus Ex Machina, and they make her that twice. She turns up to save the day on 2 occasions, and that's pretty much it. She literally says at one moment in the film, you're not going to see me for a few months. So I was a bit disappointed with how they handled Captain Marvel, but I still liked the way she kicks butt. So she saves Tony and Nebula and brings them back to Earth in a scene which is reminiscent of Iron Man 1, with Tony getting off the plane after escaping his captives from his cave. There, once again, he sees Pepper, but this time he also sees Captain America, where he tells him he's lost the kid, referring to Spider-Man. And there we get another great scene between Tony and Steve Rogers. Tony's all malnourished and going a bit loopy, and he shows real animosity towards Captain America, saying the line that he said in Avengers Age of Ultron, saying, you said we'd lose together, and he's just lost it. And it's so terrifically acted by both Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans. They're amazing in this film. This is when the rest of the team are introduced to Captain Marvel, who's like, I'm going to go and kill Thanos, and straight away they track him down. He's farming on his planet. They go there to retrieve the gauntlet, only to find he's destroyed the stones. Thor straight up murders him, chops his head off and says, I went for the head. But the problem is they've still lost. Now bear in mind, this all happens within the first 20 minutes of the film, and I've got to say, I loved how it started. When I first watched it, I was like, whoa, this is going really quickly, but I loved the tone of it. I loved that it was really moody and gloomy, which is how it should have been, because Infinity War left on such a bum note. It would have been weird if they had been like jokey straight away, and it continues even after the 5-year jump, with the remaining characters still trying to be the Avengers and do what they do, but it's still really somber. Even when Ant-Man comes out of the quantum realm and he's walking around all kind of like 28 days later, is like, what's going on? And then he realizes that his daughter might be gone, and then they have that lovely moment when he sees her again, which is again really terrifically acted. But there's no time to hang around, because Ant-Man heads straight to Avengers HQ and they hatch a plan to time travel using the quantum realm to retrieve the stones from the past and use them to bring everyone back in the present. Now this is the part in my spoiler-free review where I said the film is a bit flimsy. Like, as with all time travel movies, you can completely pick them apart in terms of plot holes, and this one is no different. I think there are a lot of plot holes and things that don't make sense, but we'll come back to that, because this is also the part in the film where they start to reintroduce like some of the humour, like Professor Hulk and Ant-Man and their selfie scene. I've got to say, I didn't mind it as much second time around, but still, the bit where they start testing out the time travel stuff and Scott turns into an old man and then a baby, I just thought, yeah, that's okay. It's all right, but it wasn't like the funniest ever. But it's the bits with Thor that I had real mixed feelings about. On the one hand, I thought it was hilarious that he's lost all motivation and let himself go, and he's really fat now and looks like the dude from Big Lebowski. But when the Hulk says, we've got a plan to stop what Thanos did, and Thor literally just turns on a dime and it's like, don't you say his name, and Korg's like, yeah, we don't say that name around here, bro. I just felt like that scene lost a bit of its gravitas, because it was such a funny scene in the first place, to then switch so suddenly to such a serious note that Thor is actually suffering like quite badly. Similarly, later on when he goes back to the events of Thor the Dark World and they make a joke out of seeing his mum again, he's like, yeah, I'm totally from the future, because that was such a lovely scene, and some of the gravitas was taken away, for me at least. But the second act does raise some interesting points, like when Cap says to Black Widow, I saw some whales on the way over here because there's less pollution and less whalers, so kind of conceding that Thanos, did have a point. Hulk and Bruce Banner have reconciled and are now at peace with one another. Tony has a kid, Morgan, with Pepper, and is reluctant to build this time machine because, as he says, try and save what we've lost for sure, but I've got to keep what I found. And even by Tony Stark standards, it is kind of a bit kind of easy how he just comes up with time travel, but it's got to be done, I suppose. At this point, I'd like to give props to the marketing of this film. Arguably, they didn't have to show any trailers. I think everyone would have gone to have seen this anyway, but if you look back at the trailers, they do actually tell you that you're going to be revisiting key moments in the other movies. And those sequences do lead to great moments. Like, I love the scene when Cap fights himself and says, I could do this all day, and he's like, yeah, I know. I love the whole New York sequence again, seeing it from different angles. But I think my standout moment in those sequences is when they go back again to the 1970s and Tony sees his dad and he's like, oh, I'm Howard Potts. That was so well handled, much better than the way they handled Thor and his mum. Just a lovely scene. But like I say, the time travel element does raise a lot of questions, like, is Loki still alive now that he has the Tesseract again? How does evil Nebula get back to the present when she handed over the Pym particle to past Thanos? And how is she still alive when she killed her past self? Again, that's what I meant when I said the film felt very flimsy. I mean, they have their characters establishing the rules within this movie about time travel. I mean, Hulk and Iron Man kind of say time travel, it's ridiculous, yeah, but that's what's going to move the plot along. They ignore the grandfather paradox, so you can't go back and kill your past self and erase yourself. But then at the same time, they say that you can't have a multiverse situation when the Grand Sorcerer says if you take the time stones out, you create branches in reality. So they say that you can't do that, but then you can't also do that. It just felt all too convenient. I get the impression that the Russos were like, yeah, we know that it's ridiculous, but we want to have it because we need to have these little character moments, and it's probably going to get answered in subsequent movies and Disney Plus, which I don't really care too much about. I just wish that it was explained better within this self-contained movie. Like, the rules don't really make sense if you think about it. But it is what it is, and it does lead to the final showdown with past Thanos brought into the future and all of the Vanished returning to fight with so many great moments, like the females all teaming up to try and get the stones to the quantum tunnel again. I loved that Black Panther remembered Clint's name like he said in Civil War, like, I don't care. I thought that was a lovely touch. But of course, the most fist-bumping fan service moment was when Captain America is worthy and he gets Mjolnir and he goes crazy. And my cinema screening went absolutely nuts. Everyone was going, yeah. But then comes the most emotional moment in the film for me. Now, out of the two front men, Captain America and Iron Man, I suspected that Captain America was going to die and maybe Tony Stark was going to die, but it turns out Tony Stark dies. He gets the gauntlet, his Iron Man gauntlet, and does the snap. Now, the way I interpreted it both times is after the snap, I thought Tony might be blind because Peter is talking to him and I think he recognised, he only reacts when he hears his voice. But the bit that really got me was when Gwyneth Paltrow goes over to him and says, "We're going to be okay, Tony. You can rest now." And then she bawls her eyes out and I was like, oh my God. And I always thought Gwyneth Paltrow was kind of lucky to be in this universe, but it was all worth it for that one scene. I thought she acted it really well and I was like, oh my God. And then to have the double whammy of Steve going back in time to replace the missing Infinity Stones and then returning as an old man and giving his shield over to Sam. I loved the moment when Bucky says to Sam, like, go ahead, like conceding, like, it's yours. It was such a lovely moment, even though I don't get how Captain America got there, because like I say, if the film says that you can't do this if it is like the multiverse, then how did he go back to a different time and still end up in this timeline? It doesn't make sense. But I still love the fact that they had that moment and Cap got his send-off and his last dance with Peggy. And that kind of sums up how I feel about the film. Yes, it doesn't make sense in a lot of places, but I loved the moments that it gave us. And this is a massive moment in cinema and I feel so lucky to have witnessed it. So that's my thoughts on Avengers Endgame, and pause the video if you want to take a closer look at my enjoyment tracker now. Like I said in my Infinity War review, I grew up watching the animated cartoons of Spider-Man and the X-Men, and I always thought I would love to see a version of this on the silver screen, and I never thought it would happen, but it has, and I'm so satisfied with it. Even if Phase 4 isn't as good, I still think I'm going to look back at these 22 movies and be like, yeah, that was the golden age of Marvel films, and I'm really satisfied with them. I can't wait for the day that I've got this on Blu-ray. I'm going to watch this, Civil War and Infinity War, like together. Like I say, that's like a perfect trilogy right there. Speaking of Spider-Man, on my second viewing they had the trailer for Spider-Man Far From Home, and there is a snippet of Happy Hogan saying to Peter, "You're all alone now," and it took on a whole new meaning knowing that Tony is now dead, and I think that's going to be a really emotional scene in Spider-Man. But like I say, if Phase 4 doesn't pan out and is not as good as what we've already got, I'm not going to mind, I don't think. I would quite like to see the Spider-Man universe kind of carry on though. So thanks for watching this video. I appreciate it's longer than all of my other videos, so thanks for hanging around till the end. I really do appreciate it. If you can, give it a like and don't forget to share the Lave. Subscribe.